Hi, I'm Jonathan Hefter, and this is Coming Home to Homemade Theater. I'm so glad to have you with us today. We have a very, very special guest for our second episode. Please welcome former producing manager of Homemade Theater, Stacie Mayette-Barnes.
Hey. Oh, nice, nice. I like it.
You deserve your own round of applause,
Is that
Stacie.
from your Conan O'Brien days?
Um, this is from YouTube, the internet.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yes, I walk around my house with an applause track playing uh,
Um,
as the soundtrack to my life.
Honestly, I've heard this before.
I don't have that big an ego, but what a treat to have you. And we're old friends, have known you so very long, and it is so critical to have your voice as part of this series. For those that may be joining us for the first time, this series, Coming Home to Homemade Theater, is a chance for intimate interviews with luminaries of homemade theaters, past and present, to help raise awareness about homemade theater's place in the Saratoga community, and also the state of the theater currently, of course, with COVID continuing to rage here. Right now, it's the beginning of December, and we are doing everything we can to keep the lights on at Homemade Theater, the ghost lights, if
Right.
you will. Maybe Stacie, with your extensive technical background, you can help break that down for our non-theater watchers in just a bit.
Ghostly? Okay. Sure.
You are certainly so closely associated with the theater. It's a treat to have you. Thank you for making time. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for asking me. It's my pleasure. I'm here, as you said, early December. No Christmas tree up, but yeah, it's great to chat HMT.
So, for those who may not be aware of your resume, can you give us a little background about how you came to Homemade Theater, when that was, and how did that turn into a multi-decade relationship?
Yeah. So Homemade Theater was just starting up around the time I was getting out of college. I got out of college. So I yeah, okay, so we're going to do the math really fast here, but so my first fall out of college, I think people were just beginning to come together at the start of Homemade Theater, but no productions yet. And I went to Europe for a bit because I didn't study abroad, and I really wanted to do that. And I saw a lot of theater, not knowing what was going to be in my future, but did that like
Where
night
was
after
that?
night in London.
Wow.
Night after night, I went to a ton of theater, and again, I only took one. I was an art major. I didn't study theater in college. I took one production management class, so it wasn't really a thing. But I did love it. So, anywho, it was late in '84. I'll just say it. That I think people were
You were
starting to come
6.
together. I was 6. Yep, yep. And so in January of '85, I did not have a full-time job yet. I was freelancing, and my mom showed me this article from the Saratogian that said, there's a theater company starting up and they're looking for help. So I went to a general meeting, and this is a story I would tell often at a volunteer meeting over the years, saying, you know what, you never know. Like I showed up to this volunteer meeting saying, I'll sweep the floor, I'll gather props, whatever. They were doing a production of Wait Until Dark at Cafe Linus, and probably about a week or so later, their stage manager had to leave the production, and they asked me to stage manage. So
And you
I
had
ended up.
no experience.
I did one show in college. I did, and I think there's a natural inclination there. I think stage management is in my blood, even though I think I still will say it's the best job in the theater. I mean, even though that's not what I end up doing for a living.
Props to the stage managers out there who make it
Well,
happen.
yeah, absolutely. It's a great job. It is. It's like you're a conductor. When you're calling that show, it's really exciting. We opened March 17th, 1985 with Wait Until Dark at Cafe Lena in that tiny little 55-seat theater. And for perspective now, like we needed to fit in with Lena's schedule because not as Lena's is set up now. There was theater space and there was their cafe performance space. So we couldn't be performing at the same time. So we were performing
Right.
like Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and we still sold out. It was amazing. So
And
yeah.
how did Homemade Theater come to be
going to
at
be there.
Lena's? Who went to her, and what was it like to partner with her in those early years?
Well, this wasn't my doing. Credit goes. So Jonathan Foster and Susan Miller, our two founders. Jonathan was a transplant from New York City who was really just up in Saratoga visiting some friends. And he happened to go to a show at Cafe Lena. And the story goes, as he was sitting there in the cafe, as there's a performer, he's like, there's a curtain here. What's that? It's a theater. We should put on a play. So that sort of started it. And Judy Weil, who's a friend of both Susan and Jonathan's, put the two of them together, knowing that Susan had a good business mind, even though she was an elementary school teacher. She's still an absolute go-getter, and put the two of them together, and it was a small board that then formed, and they came up with the idea. They did some classes and workshops, and then this first show. So Jonathan was, actor, director, artist. If I swiveled this around, you'd see a few paintings here at home.
Oh, great.
Of Jonathan's artwork and different things that he's made for us. I know Susan has a lot of paintings too. So yeah, super, super talented person with a great drive for creating art, for creating theater.
And what was the state of the theater scene in Saratoga at that time?
I think there were different companies around. I know that there was one based in Ballston Spa at some point, maybe a summer troupe, but it was very different, and somewhere in our history, it was like boop, 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 a ton of theaters, just companies cropping up. They're like, what does it take to create a theater company? Like a few friends coming together over a kitchen table saying, hey, we could create our own. But ours, I think it was, in on the earlier days. And I remember like out at the theater offices, there's a scrapbook, one for each season, because press used to be a bigger thing, like newspaper articles and all. And I remember those from the beginning, like what a start for this small fledgling theater company. And it was always a question back then, like, we did a show, should we do another one? What do you guys think? Should we continue this? Should it be a thing? And we did not until that fall do our second show. So it was like November.
Was it always linear in those early years, or was there ever a consideration of, it's been a good run, we've done 3-4 productions, or did it, is the narrative that it always grew, the board grew, donors grew? Was it always an upswing?
Probably it's a better question for Susan. I think that question really only came into play maybe between 1 and 2, and maybe 2 and 3, but that ball started rolling. So like I said, that one, like, should we do another one? And then once we did, and we moved from Lena's, so the first 2 shows were at Lena's, and then we did Cat on a Hot Tin Roof at Ballet Regent Studio, which was, over on Woodlawn, and at the old Ballet Regent studio up on the 3rd floor walk up, which was, get people to come to the theater like that, and folding chairs and all in a platform built stage, because it really wasn't a performing space for theater. So I think at that point we did, and it was at that show, and I didn't mean to skip over You Can't Take It With You, our second show, because that was amazing, but it was at that show at Ballet Regent, the Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, that Herb Chesbrough, who was the executive director at STAC at that time, came to the show, and he helped facilitate the meeting between us, like Susan and Jonathan, and the folks at Parks, because the little theater was sitting empty during those winter months, the off season. No one was in there. So there was an opportunity, and we, in the fall of '86, moved in for our first fall season, a fall to spring season.
And what was it like? You were part of the crew consistently from that first production. What was it like to go from 55 seats to Ballet Regent to almost 500 seats,
right,
and the responsibilities of filling that house and overhead, and it was a 1-year lease, It
was a 1-year lease, and then a 3-year lease, and then subsequent 5-year leases. So always, revisiting that. It was pretty amazing. And probably, again, that's more, I think Susan, being our general manager at that point, felt that burden more. than I did here. I was stage managing, and I came on staff a few years later because Susan ended up taking, as I mentioned, school teacher. She took a leave of absence from school to run the theater for a couple of years. And when she went back to school, I came on staff as an associate manager. And then
And that was in 88 that you were the associate
88,
manager?
yep.
And were you working those first 3 years before you became the associate manager? Were you were making money other ways? And
other ways. I worked in advertising.
Wow.
Yeah.
At what point did, that offer come to you and you thought, okay, theater full-time and no one's going to get rich doing it? What was that moment like for you to dive in and be full-time?
Well, I wasn't getting that rich in advertising anyway. I was already hooked. I already loved this theater. They became my family. And, I'm trying to remember. I think the bigger decision for me was a few years later when Susan left. And that was a big, do I want to be general manager?
And what year was that?
95.
Uh-huh.
95. That one I had to really think about, because that was huge. The decision to take that job, I think they had hired someone else, didn't work out when I became associate manager, and like, all right, I can do this. In the office at that point, was it Susan's house? If you can imagine, dog phone ringing in the middle of the night, whatever, can I get tickets? Yeah, it was small, but we did it. As I think is the truth for so many other theaters in the area. Homemade theater, if I haven't said these words yet, community-based theater with a professional edge is how we always like to say it. And but there are many community theaters in our area who all make it work. They come together, they're working in their homes, they're doing that. Maybe they have an office, maybe they don't. Yeah, the drive is all the same. I think making it a real business, I think we took it another step.
You mentioned earlier that it became family for you, and certainly in these times with coronavirus shutting down so many organizations and businesses, and of course so many other theater companies affected as well, there is that collaborative spirit, that shoestring spirit. How has that informed the kind of person that you have become, or like how you work with others and what you want for yourself? And of course now you're married and it's not the 80s anymore. It's like that spirit of collaborative, by your bootstraps theater. Like, what was important to you about that, and how has that informed how you work with people now?
I think it's just who I am. I think that is just my nature, and I hope I understand your question correctly. But I think even before HMT, I think that's generally been my nature, to be collaborative, to find a way to make things work. And my life is different now. I was single for a lot of these years, and the theater was my life, absolutely. And that community of friends that I put together, there was that point. I think maybe we all have a point in our lives, whether you're in your 20s or your 30s, before you're all connected, that pool of people around you truly becomes like a bit of a family of choice. And that was real for me. There's that group of friends who, we traveled together and we did things, and they're still important, now.
And you're still in touch with some names and faces from the early years?
Sure. Maybe, things change and drift, and some folks have passed away. It's been a lot of years.
And
yeah, and I was just gonna say, often, we'll, either whether Susan or we'll look at each other like, oh my God, these years do tick by. When I heard recently that, when we hit 2020 and we were, just as far away from the now am I going to say this correctly? We were as far from 1980 as 1940 was.
Yes.
From 1980, that was like, wow.
Yes, those moments where you realize,
they add up.
Whatever it was, 16 years after Woodstock that homemade theater started, but 16 years ago from here was 2004, and I think I have mail from 2004 sitting around here.
I think I still have some clothes from the 90s. They were.
Can you share a little bit about Jonathan Foster, the one of the two founders, as you mentioned, along with Susan Miller, who handled more of the office side in their general manager role? Jonathan Foster from New York City was the founding artistic director.
Mhm.
What was he like? How integral was he to the drive to make this theater be more than a one-off and actually see it now continuing now 35 years later?
Right. Well, it was Jonathan's artistic vision that made it happen. It was Susan's drive and her sense that kept things moving. And I'm not sure I could do it justice, but I know that the phrase between the two of them was always like, trust me. Jonathan would come to Susan with an idea and she'd be like, she'd give him the eye probably. And he's like, trust me, and the two of them had that, relationship of, Susan believed in his vision, and worked hard to deliver on that. But Jonathan, you know, this this is Jonathan. This is Jonathan at rehearsal with the cigarette.
Yes, when you
You
could
can't
smoke.
smoke in the theater anymore, right? And File, his dog, would
That's
follow him
right.
around. File, named for a character in The Rainmaker. Just a pretty brilliant guy. And Jonathan was probably my first exposure, other than, like I said, in college or maybe even in high school, to someone like that, to that true artist, at least in the theater world. And so it shaped me and how I approached things. Um, and so it was interesting too, years went on and working with other directors, still in my stage management time, like, great, they're not all the same, you know? And so they all have their idiosyncrasies, but yeah, I'm not doing Jonathan justice here. Just a really brilliant, driven, creative man, who, we're lucky that he chose to come to Saratoga.
It's important that
Um,
we invoke his name and bring him in, and
yeah,
some may know, but I'm assuming that those that are watching this will not know that I know you from when you
yeah.
stage managed my first role on the Homemade Theater stage 33 years ago.
Hmm.
I'm in my mid 70s, and that was
I looked that up. Yeah.
I was directed by Jonathan. And I remember his dog running around, and that sent me on my way. And I remember him pulling me into more than one corner, saying, "Get your shit together, because you could do this if you chose to." And that was the
Hmm.
voice ringing in my ear as I headed to New York after
Right.
college. So we're remembering our friend Jonathan. And I remember, and I walked in
Yeah.
off the street about 8 years ago, relocating back to Saratoga with my family, walked in cold to an audition, and you were there, and I'll never forget the look on your face. And I think one of the first things I said to you, and I'd seen you once or twice over the years when I would come to visit, but as you look exactly the same. And I would still say that I just have this picture of you in my head, stage managing on Golden Pond in the fall of '87, and you look the same and continue to have the same energy and spirit for what it means to effort for theater. And there's so many years, especially after you took over the general manager role, where it would have shut down for sure if it
Mm.
was not for you. So thank you for all those efforts. And now your path over the years
Hmm.
morphed a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like to move into a producing manager role? What is that? How did you see your own role changing?
Yeah.
And then obviously in the last couple of years you have cycled out of the theater. So I would love to
Right.
hear, and our watchers would love to hear a little bit about that path for you.
Sure. So, Jonathan, if people didn't know, became sick. He had AIDS, and so in that first, Susan was with the theater for the first 10 years. It was towards the end of that time that Jonathan became sick, and it was definitely more challenging all around. Terrible to see him go through that, and also then, like, okay, we got other directors and other people to work with. And so it was at the end, Jonathan ended up moving away, probably, to be closer to family. And he wasn't, he needed help around him. And so in that ninth season, I think Susan made that decision to leave. I think her passion was definitely linked to Jonathan's passion. That's what clicked for them. I was honored that they asked me to be general manager at that time. And as I said, I think that was the harder decision for me. I remember really thinking a lot about it. I took myself away for the weekend, just did some soul searching, um, and talked to friends. And I've more than once said, you can do anything for a year. You do it. Like, okay. But that year turned on, and the years passed. I don't think, though, that there was ever a question that I didn't want to see the theater continue. I didn't know that I was the person to do that. I guess maybe it's only now in retrospect that I can look back and say, like, yeah, we did it, and not I did it, we did it.
Sure.
HMT is the people. It's all the people who choose to be there to give their time to, we didn't say this, but maybe it's somewhere else. HMT is largely volunteers. There's a very small staff, skeleton staff, maybe 3.5 people, sort of, a TD general manager. I know it's slightly differently configured right now, but it's a tiny staff that keeps this moving forward. But we couldn't do it without all those people who choose to spend their free time making the shows happen. Like, that's huge. That's huge. It's funny, just the other night, I was in another Zoom meeting for another organization that I'm involved with, and talking about people coming together, working towards a goal. And, I said, this is not dissimilar to my time at the theater, when I would always say to people, what brings you here? Your motivation for coming and being involved in the theater may be different, but our end goal, putting on a great show, entertaining people, having fun, that's the same, hopefully, for all of us, and that it was nothing if we weren't having fun too. That was so important, to just enjoy ourselves, to feel good about the work. It's also something, when I think, and I didn't know if you'd ask me about this, like my favorite part of the process, like I always loved auditions. But I love the first night of rehearsal, and I love, okay, maybe opening night, maybe, I don't know, maybe not opening night. Sometimes it's a challenge. You're breathing, you finally breathe. But auditions are great. But that first night of rehearsal, when you have all that energy in a room,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, that was amazing. Like, people are just perched, ready to start. And I would always tell people, like, we're going to ask a lot of you. We're going to ask a lot of you, your time, be on time, take this seriously. You're going to work hard, but you're going to be part of something you can be really proud of. Like, we didn't want a lesser product at any moment. That sounds so institutionalized. We don't want a lesser product, but we want to give the public the absolute best show that we could. And so whatever we could do to make that happen is what we wanted to do. Okay, I totally went
No, it's
all
beautiful.
over, but
Can you share a bit about coming to the place where you chose to leave?
sure. I knew at some point I would leave the theater. I think it's so important for the health of the organization to keep growing, like new ideas, new people. It's just needed. So this opportunity came my way, not that many steps away from the theater, over the Gideon Putnam. And I took position as, the title is catering sales manager, but I'm working with events. I'm selling, but working to create people's events. And so I can't tell you how many times that I say, as I talk to families, so weddings are huge. It's a big part of what I do, that I will comfort people, hopefully, and say, it's okay. I used to work in theater. We got
Right.
this, because that wedding is a lot like opening night. Just is. It just is, So all the players, our BEO meeting or banquet event order meetings is a lot like a production meeting. It's just about bringing all those elements together. It's delivering that best product you can. And so I love seeing, just as a director and designer's vision, I love seeing that couple's vision coming, into reality, and having that be the best event that they want to have, that they're imagining.
And it's worth saying that obviously that business is ground to a halt. I mean, there are micro weddings happening, but obviously, unless you have the world's fanciest office, I think the audience assumes that you're at home right now. There is no office to go to, and there is no business coming in over there at the Gideon, which is a partner organization of homemade theaters for
Parks,
sure in that
right,
parks complex. So
right,
very kindred spirits, these live service oriented
right,
organizations that are really hurting right now.
right,
And
right. We need to get to that place where people can gather again. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
no, that's perfect, because there is
Yeah,
something about the very human need to gather together, to have a communal experience, to have the lights go down, or if you're at a wedding, there's that hush before the bride walks in, and
right,
there's this, we are all doing this together. We're having a shared experience. And I feel
right.
like there is something about this call that we're doing through this interview series to raise awareness of the state of the theater. You mentioned the skeleton crew, 3.5 people, which is, it's worth saying that as far as I know, up until really recently, your mom was still lending
She
a hand
was.
in the office, which is incredible. And she's the reason why you were there to begin with. So that skeleton crew that we would love to see continue to get a paycheck as they're doing everything they can to get the word out there
Right.
that homemade theater that's been around for 35 years, there'll be a point, like any organization, where the bills won't get paid. And so for those who are appreciating hearing about the history, it's not too early to go over to homemadetheater.org and see the many ways that you can support that organization. So, but yeah, of course. So sorry to hear that you are at home on, like so many people that I know, on furloughed from what is the work that lights you up, that you have found that you're pretty good at, and that it actually has a calling out there in the world.
You need the break to go have a drink of water.
Oh, I'm
I
good.
hear that.
This is
Okay.
just my natural.
I'm gonna have
You're
more
my
coffee.
11th interview of the day.
Oh my gosh.
No, I'm joking.
Okay. I
Um,
was gonna say you started at midnight.
it's such, I look forward to, we'll have to have a part 2 with you, Stacie. I look forward to more from you, because there are so much more that we want to get into and want to hear from you. But grateful to have had this time, this first chat with you. And I
Thank you.
know you get anxious about questions, but in the spirit, with a nod of the cap to James Lipton and Inside the Actor Studio, I have developed very short, fun, theater-oriented questionnaire, which now this is our second go. The first was with Mayor Kelly, and which was fun. And so I have,
I'm scared.
4 quick questions. Well, 5 quick questions for you. Obviously, we heard a lot about your behind the scenes background. And you never had an interest in getting on the stage. Tell us about that. It was never part of the plan for you to audition or to be part of a cast at all?
Correct. If you ask my husband, he will say I'm a closet actor, but I would be maybe for an audience of one, him. But no, no need, absolutely no need, truly. But I am honored to have had the opportunity to help deliver that. Absolutely.
Okay, well then you'll do your
Blah,
best with some of these performance related questions. So
blah.
first,
Oh
number 1,
no.
well, not all of them, but
Oh God. All right,
Stacie,
pass.
what show title best describes your life and why?
Man, looking on the shelf. You know, I'm just gonna go with one of my favorites, Our Town, because I do feel this. I love the play. I loved when we produced it, and it was a beautiful, beautiful piece. But community is important to me, and those links and those relationships. So I'll go with that, and it's also what popped into my head.
And also it helps us remember our friend Alma Becker,
Absolutely.
so who directed that production. Stacie, if you could star in any one Broadway musical, this is like pushing every button. You're on a stage and you're singing. What would it be and why?
Man, is this where we just edit out?
Sure. Enjoy your 45 seconds of crickets while we all.
No. It's this wouldn't be for me, but if I had that voice, and certainly having seen some videos recently, and I'm going to give Laura a plug, and Homemade Theater's very first musical, as Susan used to like to call it, our first and last musical, because we never do one again, was Gypsy. So man, Mama Rose, what a role.
Ooh,
what a role. Yeah,
it turns out musicals sell.
Yeah, they do.
That was a good one. Good title. I remember. What year was that Gypsy was done?
92.
Took 7 years to figure out that people like musicals.
Well, Yeah, I think we knew,
Yeah,
but it was huge and it was not what we were used to doing. But yeah, and they're loads of fun. And it, yeah, it not just brings out people, but it brings a huge community of actors together too. And
sure.
that's so fabulous. Yeah. Yeah.
Good one, Gypsy. During intermission, you always make sure to A, visit the restroom, B, get an alcoholic drink at the bar,
I'm
C,
waiting.
read the cast bios, or D, grab one of the famous blondies made by my lovely wife, Catherine.
Oh, I'm probably reading the cast bios.
Right?
You
For
know,
sure.
at HMT, I'm probably hanging near the heat register in the house right hallway, and it's where we just chat with people.
After all this is over, Stacie, the first show you would like to go see on a stage would be what?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I just want to be there. Truly, um, it's not about the title. It's about the experience, and I don't mean to be trite about it.
No, it's the
Um,
appropriate answer.
yeah, I've seen a few videos and things. Through something from that Disney special the other night where they had performers singing a song in a theater from Frozen. It's Frozen. Lovely piece of theater, but it's Frozen. Um, but man, they had the two actors on stage. I'll cry
Yeah.
because this is what I do. The cast came down the aisles and they were all singing together. I showed it to Howard, my husband. I'm bawling, because that energy. Like we need that in our lives. We do.
That's a perfect place to end. I'll table the rest of my questions because I really appreciate you sharing your heart and us being able to end with a little vulnerability and candor. And that's what theater's all about. And we're making this honest and open effort to, as we've said, raise awareness of the people that have been trying to keep the lights on for all these years and keep that spirit that Stacie embodies so well alive in Saratoga Springs, along with so many other organizations. So again, go to homemadetheater.org,
Yes,
see the
please.
ways that you can support. I've ordered my 2021 calendar today. There's the ability to get a mask for a $10 donation. And like Stacie, we look forward to seeing you in the theater when we do reopen someday. Stacie, thank you so much for taking time to be with us and our audience today. And I hope we can do part 2 at some point. That would be lovely. And we wish you the best.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.